real parents, real stories. It's the Meet the Parents podcast.
Welcome to episode 46 of the Meet the Parents podcast, and more chat from some of your favourite parenting bloggers. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and tonight I'm joined by John from Dad You Geek and Simon from Man vs Pink. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
On this week's podcast, we're going to focus on books and reading as we talk about World Book Day and about encouraging our kids to read. As you're no doubt painfully aware, if you have younger children, it was World Book Day last week, a day which has many parents scrambling to buy or make last-minute costumes for their kids to wear to school. Now, this was the 20th year in which there's been a World Book Day. It's organised by UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, to help promote reading, publishing and copyright. It's held on the 23rd of April every year, or the first Thursday of March in the UK, just because we like to be a little bit different. Chaps, what do we think? Any event that promotes appreciation of books has got to be a good thing, doesn't it? What do you think, Simon?
I completely agree that a day that celebrates books and reading is fantastic.
And what about you, John?
I like World Book Day, and I agree with encouraging children to read, and I've always done that with my kids. I think it's been hijacked by parents in some regards as to try and have their kid look the best fancy dress costume, but I think that's the cynical Dad You Geek coming in there, I think.
There is an element of that, isn't it? I always settle for knowing that my child has at least the second worst costume.
I'm creative in many ways, but dressing up, no, I'm not very good at it.
Simon, I know your daughter does like her character costumes anyway, but was this her first time dressing up for World Book Day?
Yeah, it was interesting. So this is her first year at school, so she's in reception now. And I was thinking back, so last year we didn't do it because we were in New Zealand this time last year. And as you've just mentioned, World Book Day isn't actually World Book Day on this date. And so it wasn't World Book Day there. And then as Facebook is wont to do, it kind of throws up memories of X amount of years ago. And today, one from 2 years ago came up. So it's when my daughter was 3. And that was clearly the first World Book Day we did. And it was, she was 3 years old at nursery. And she just wore her Dorothy dress because Wizard of Oz has been a firm favourite of hers. Yeah, so that year she went as Dorothy.
Yeah, now we'll come on to how she went dressed this year in a minute, but John, how about you? Has Little Geek gotten dressed up for World Book Day in the past, and does she still do it?
This year, she was very annoyed. So Little Geek is now in her first year of senior school, or year 7 in New Money, and she was very disappointed that there'd been no communication from the school about dressing up for World Book Day. And then I got a text at about 20 to 9 saying, "I can't believe it, Dad. All of the teachers are dressed up for World Book Day and none of the students." I think the teachers really went all out for it at her school. So fair play, really, because we're in Harlow. It's a very diverse community. And I think it takes that pressure away there that the students can go in, but the school still makes a thing about it.
So hang on. So it's not parents hijacking it at Little Geek School. It's the teachers. So, in previous years, what has she gone dressed as?
Dorothy was a very popular one with us because we had a Dorothy dressing up outfit already. Little Geek has loved The Wizard of Oz for as long as I can remember, really. We read it to her from quite a young age. And then when she was old enough to watch the film, which was scary in parts for her, but she loved it. And she still loves the film. And also, we had some cop-outs, actually. The one that Facebook, as Simon said earlier, Facebook reminded me today that in 2014, Katie dressed up as the Wicked Queen from Snow White because we may well have had a vampire-ish type dress outfit from the previous Halloween. I believe one year she went as a Harry Potter character as well. In fact, I think she went as a female Harry with lightning strike scar on her forehead as well.
And isn't it funny how no one ever goes dressed as Draco?
It is, although we do see a kid walking to school who is the spit of Draco, and we always say, "Oh, look, there's Draco. He's on time today." But yeah, no, I wonder if he ever goes dressed as Draco, because he would put off a very convincing Draco, actually.
Yeah, so like many other schools up and down the country, our kids' school, asked all the kids to mark the day by coming dressed as a book character. So our kids went as one of the characters from The Secret Seven. I can't actually remember which one. The Wimpy Kid and Mog the Cat, respectively.
Oh, Mog the cat. That was one. That was My parents' cats are called Meg and Mog.
And I think there were a few McCavities as well for the more poetically minded. But if you're on Instagram or Facebook and you follow any other parents, I'm sure your timelines will no doubt have been flooded with pictures of the kids all dressed up for the day with varying levels of enthusiasm.
Yeah, some grumpy person on their Instagram story may have actually moaned about all of these pictures. He shall remain nameless. But did you guys see the picture of that school that had all of the children dressed as Wally from Where's Wally?
No,
There's a picture, and it was literally the whole hall was just dressed of these kids dressed as Where's Wally. I think one of them had thick rimmed glasses on.
I certainly saw lots of individual kids dressed, but an entire school, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It really was.
I have to admit that we fall into the camp of parents who kind of dread World Book Day every year. I mean, Carver's okay, but the boys aren't hugely into the whole dressing up thing. And, we're two parents who both work and don't really have much of a creative bone in their body when it comes to costume making. There isn't a lot of time to spend on devising and making up a carefully constructed hand-stitched costume, especially not when there's always at least a couple of parents in every class who seem to treat World Book Day as an opportunity to engage in a spot of one-upmanship by producing a costume based on, I don't know, an obscure Jane Austen character that takes them weeks to make. But yeah, given that neither of us or the boys at least particularly care about the whole costume thing, World Book Day does tend to be something to be endured rather than enjoyed. And of course there are always easy cop-outs, aren't there? In particular, I noticed there were an awful lot of Harry Potter costumes, maybe even more so than in previous years. I don't know, maybe Tesco were selling them cut price this year or something, but I imagine a lot of classrooms must have resembled Hogwarts, but judging from my Instagram timeline at least, a lot of schools must also have looked like the set of the latest Avengers movie, given the number of Captain America's, Iron Man's and Spider-Man costumes that I spotted. I have to say that does kind of nag me a bit. It's not something I'm going to lose a lot of sleep over because there are more important things in the world. But given that I do get the whole bloody hell do we have to find 3 costumes again this year thing, but unless we're counting comics or books of the film or annuals as books, surely superhero costumes kind of go against the spirit of World Book Day a little bit and just turn it into a slightly bookish fancy dress day, a bit like a spring version of Halloween.
It is a cop out, but I get parents just taking the easy option, to be honest. Because if no doubt a lot of those would already have those Marvel characters costumes sitting in a wardrobe somewhere gathering dust, and why not? Yeah, I'm with you. I'm at least hoping that those that have dressed up as Harry Potter have either encouraged their children to read the Harry Potter books because they're brilliant, or are reading them to their children.
Like I said, I don't think I'm ever going to be critical of any other parents given that I get as uninvolved in all the costume side of things as possible.
You can imagine the uproar if the head teacher stood at the gate and said, "Sorry, you got to go home. That's not a book character. No, off you go."
Simon, your daughter's school took a slightly different take on the day, didn't they? By asking kids not to come dressed as book characters, but as something a little bit different, didn't they? So can you explain a little bit about what that was and why they did it?
Yeah, so the whole school and teachers they came in their pajamas. Yeah, they were told to wear their pajamas requested to wear their pajamas and bring in their favourite bedtime story. When I read that, I was just like, that's fantastic. It brings the focus back onto the point of World Book Day, which is reading. And certainly for us, bedtime is kind of the absolute point when we definitely read books. We try and do it other times of the day as well, but there's such a clear association with bedtime and reading for us, and like there is for many families. And go back to your earlier point about kids wearing superhero outfits or something. And, as you know, I'm a massive superhero fan, but I think it's a nonsense for kids to be wearing that. And I'm not blaming the kids or the parents or anything. It just shows a kind of inherent weakness in the idea of celebrating books by making it into a fancy dress day.
Now, certain character costumes crop up on World Book Day more than most. We've mentioned Harry Potter already. Characters like Paddington Bear always seems to be quite popular as well. But I had to laugh when former Doctor Who David Tennant appeared on BBC One's The One Show and revealed that his 14-year-old son had gone to school dressed as Christian Grey from the 50 Shades books, complete with a pair of handcuffs. Let's not ask too closely where he got those from.
Is that true?
Apparently, yeah.
I'm just hoping. I'm hoping that is a joke. He was joking.
Who knows?
It was on the Huffington Post, so it must be true.
Going beyond that, did either of you notice either in real life or on social media any more, offbeat character choices that were a little bit out of the ordinary?
I saw there's two that stood out for me. One was someone. It's ridiculous. It's not even funny, but it makes me laugh. Someone went as their favourite book was The Highway Code, and they went dressed as a road. So they're in blackface. They're in blackface wearing all black outfit with white lines down the middle.
I think that's genius.
You get marks for originality, I think.
And what the other one? It was a child went as Pinhead from Hellraiser. If you remember that.
Yeah, I do. I bet that was an interesting one to explain in class.
Exactly. It was but it was a very well done outfit. But that was a child doing that. Yeah, it wasn't the Highway Code was an adult.
You have to hope the child who went dressed as Pinhead hadn't had to watch the film first.
Yes.
How about you, John? Did you notice anything unusual?
Anyway, and I don't know if this is an old one. One picture I did see was, and this is where I'm really kicking myself now. Do you remember from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the girl who ate the sweet and then blew up into a raspberry or blueberry or whatever it was?
That's Violet Beauregard.
That's the one. She was dressed like that, and with full on balloon or something around her. And I don't know where that was from, but I saw it and thought that's ingenious. And the other one that made me laugh was the Stick Man. In theory, should have been brilliant, but in reality, just looked like a piece of poo.
Stick Man, with my figure, that's not a character I'm ever going to be mistaken for. And one particular one that caught my eye that I think went pretty viral was the boy who dressed up in green, complete with curly wig and drawn-on beard, and he went to school as Joe Wicks, a.k.a. the body coach.
Oh, yes, I did see that one.
Yes.
And just in case you didn't get the reference, he went in with a copy of his book, Lean in 15, to complete the ensemble. Genius, I thought. I do like a bit of originality, and it's certainly an easier one to explain to your schoolmates than Christian Grey or Pinhead, isn't it? Because nothing says World Book Day like a spot of sadomasochism, does it? Now, of course, the key message behind World Book Day is to promote reading amongst kids in particular. Simon, how big a part does reading play in your daughter's life?
Massive, yeah. I mean, we read often, as much as we can. Like I say, always at bedtime and bath time, but then we try and do it other times during the day as well. And obviously now she's 5, it's kind of getting her to read as well. And it's part of a wider thing. I'm a big film buff and comic books as well, and it's we kind of engage generally in stories and talking about stories. I've always seen stories as a vital thing. It's just kind of everything. It's kind of it's almost how we learn to be human. These are the ways children and all of us learn about characters and relationships and social interaction is really through stories. However you break it down, whether it's telling a joke or a newspaper article or whatever, it's all stories. So stories are really important, and we engage in stories, talk about stories, and engage in books a lot. And one of the things we've done much sooner than I thought we would do is kind of read more grown-up books, grown up for a 5-year-old, as bedtime books, and it's kind of been a really interesting joint adventure for all of us. So we're kind of delving into books we'd never read before. So it's terrible. Like before becoming a parent, I'd never read any Roald Dahl, like none. It's kind of
at all, ever
at all, nothing. It's kind of shocking when I realised I'd never read any Roald Dahl.
Yeah, that is very shocking. Yeah.
So we started doing that, and it was a great exploration for both of us to kind of get into reading Roald Dahl, and I was enjoying it as much as her. And I'd always think that enthusiasm is so important. Like if you can show your enthusiasm for something and then you can pass that on to them, that's kind of half of it done. Then they're engaged in it because you are too.
Yeah, it's funny what you say about Roald Dahl, because I was the same, not with Dahl, but with Enid Blyton. I'd read barely any Blyton when I was a child, and yet, I now discovered those over the last few years with the kids, and all three of them love all the Enid Blyton books. So that's been a bit of a voyage of discovery for me as well as for them. So, Simon, you said your daughter now, she's reading a lot more, quite grown-up books for her age. But what kind of books does she like?
She likes a broad range of stories, and it's it's as much as things we're trying to introduce her to, and things we, like I said, we kind of want to engage in together. So Wizard of Oz is one of them. The first Harry Potter we've just done. I'm trying to think what else there was. There's this great book I loved when I was like 11 called Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. It was made into a cartoon called The Secret of Nim, and it was just a wonderful story. And we read that. I read that to her last year. What was the other one? Railway Children. Yeah, just all these kind of stories that wouldn't necessarily have read, and then by reading it, and she loves it. She kind of keeps asking for the next installment, the next chapter, and it's all it's kind of earlier than I thought we got to this classic stage of reading longer books at bedtime in installments. I think it was just getting to that point of there's so many great children's picture books around, and it's fantastic, but it was just getting a bit monotonous. The kind of same level. It was really good to kind of kick it up a gear.
Thinking back, can you remember how old she was when you first started reading to her?
We did, as you kind of told to kind of read to them when they're young, when they're babies, and I used to be honest, I used to hate it. I found it really fruitless and thankless. Like, you're reading this story, and it wasn't really. They weren't really engaging in the same way. They were just kind of touching the page and trying to rip it half the time and do all that. But I still we persevered with it, but it was not enjoyable at all. And then it was coming up to 2, so it was between 20 months and 2, I think. She started getting a sense of narrative, a sense of like one thing leads to another. That's when we started. We hadn't watched any TV until then, because I never wanted to be just like stick on a light show for her. I wanted her to be able to. When we started doing it, then she could start engaging with it. And it was just so great when that happened that I could get a sense that she was understanding story and understanding the progression of events. That's when I started enjoying it more, and then really started to discover this world of children's literature I'd never really engaged in. And Dr. Seuss, and I think I'd never done any Dr. Seuss, and I just loved them because it was the language of Dr. Seuss was really so rewarding to sort of go through repeat times.
I've lost count of the number of times now that I must have read Green Eggs and Ham over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, well, you've gone through it obviously 3 times. That thing, you say that one, I just love reading that one out loud. There's something about the rhythm of the language and the way it's phrased, and if that's ever pulled off the shelf, can you read that? I really enjoy it. I get really into it.
As we have with Cara, you must also have reached the stage over the past few months where your daughter has started to read for herself as well.
Yes, I mean it's interesting. My wife has started this thing because I think we'll come to this later, but actually the amount of time we read ourselves, my wife and I, is kind of lessened, especially since becoming parents. And for me, since not working and not commuting, that's when I used to really read a lot. So now our daughter's starting to read. My wife's done this thing once a week, on Saturday or Sunday if we're in, it's called an hour of reading. So we have an hour, and then we all kind of go off on various rooms on our own just to read. So I'll either read a book or the paper. My wife will read, and our daughter will kind of practicing her reading skills on her books.
And at this age as well, that you can almost see the reading skills improving by the week, can't you?
Yes, exactly. As soon as they learn, we're kind of obviously following the school and how they're teaching it, and then as soon as they learn the next phase of words and digraphs and trigraphs and all that kind of stuff, then they're I think you're right, every week it kind of unlocks a new aspect for them.
Yeah, with us at the moment, Cara loves to show off how well she can read, and we've been really lucky with all 3 of our kids that they're all very enthusiastic and voracious readers. Encouraging bedtime stories or getting them to read books that they brought home from school has never been an issue for us. The challenge actually has been more convincing them that it's time to turn the lights out. And one thing we've found, one of the logistical challenges of having 3 kids who still all have pretty similar bedtimes is trying to do bedtime stories for all 3 of them when there were only 2 of you, or in some cases just the one in the evening. Admittedly that is becoming a bit easier now because Isaac's 9, so he likes to read to himself in bed, and Toby can do that a bit as well. So, but they do both enjoy still being read to, and we do try to listen to them when they're reading as well. Cara, who's still not yet 5, still very much needs that one-to-one attention to support her development. John, how about you?
One thing I won't ever forget is the Biff, Chip and Kipper books. And I don't know if you still have them at school,
Oh, yes.
schools your kids go to. So they seem to be a stalwart of British education for most schools. And Katie still refers to them now. My nieces are reading them, and she sits down with her cousins and goes through them, and with some great fond memories. I remember writing a very quick post about some of the books we used to read. And for Katie, my earliest memory of a book for her was The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I mainly remember that because we've still got the book and it is destroyed. She would be chewing the corners, ripping the pages, but it's holding in there. And the other ones were, most families love the Gruffalo and the Gruffalo series, really. And it's great. I've got a godson now, and he's got those books and loving them, I believe. And we walk around. They're in some woods in quite a few places around the UK now. And it's good to see them bring those stories to life, which is brilliant. But again, going back to Roald Dahl, the ones for me was we gave Ashley some Roald Dahl books, and she's passed them on to Katie now. And Katie still picks them up every now and then and reads through them because she loves the book.
Were there any particular types of books that the girls really got into?
Katie, from an early age, really wanted me to read the Harry Potter books because she was aware of the films. Even though she hadn't watched any of them yet, she really wanted to read them. So we started reading through the series of books for them, which she just was absorbed into that Harry Potter world, as J.K. Rowling does immerse you in that. And I have to give all credit to her school as well, actually, for their English. They have no homework for English apart from reading half an hour a day, every day. Mm. And you see the benefit it has in their development, more so at a younger age, but even as they continue to grow. I just think it's something I didn't do enough as a kid, despite my dad trying to get me to read The Hobbit at a really ridiculously early age. But being a boy, I think I was stereotypical. I just wasn't interested in reading at all. So I don't know if you find that quite difficult, Tim, or not. But yeah, I hated reading as a kid.
It's interesting though that you've been you've actively supported the girls in reading to them, and that they've then that Katie at least has kind of picked up the habit and become a bookworm, as you say. And it's
Ashley is very much a bookworm as well, but she was always more of an independent reader. So when she was growing, she was happy to be read her school books to her, but as soon as she could read herself, she wasn't interested in anybody else reading to her. She would take that away, and she's been the same ever since.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Kind of how much kids take after their parents' example when it comes to reading, and we do become really important role models to them in this respect as they're growing up. I mean, both my wife and I love reading, and I think that enthusiasm has certainly transmitted itself to the kids. Maybe they'd have been voracious readers anyway, but certainly us being so encouraging can't have hurt things. And I remember we started reading to all of them at the first possible opportunity. We used to have a rocking chair in the nursery, which used to be our little reading spot, and I think we must have started reading stories to them from 3 months old or so, pretty much as soon as they were able to hold their heads up, I think. And reading is, for me, reading was something that was a big part of my childhood, and I have really quite vivid memories of being tucked up in bed while my dad read story after story and patiently agreed to my constant demands for just one more story.
One more page, Dad, one more page.
Yeah, that's it, just one more. And I loved being read to, and as I grew up, I loved to read myself, and I was one of those kids who could curl up with a book during the summer holidays and not emerge until I'd read it all in one sitting. So I remember I must have been 10, I think, the summer I read The Hobbit, and I remember reading it in it was either 1 or 2 days. I know I got through it really quickly, and I remember reading Lord of the Rings, a book a day over 3 days, and things like that. So yeah, I didn't often see the light of day.
But it's interesting, you're talking about like trying to build on something or even replicate something from your childhood that you remember, to how you were parented. And I'm reflecting, I want our daughter to basically have a better engagement with books than I did. I'm kind of coming from a different direction, though. Whereas, as I said before, I love stories. I love engaging with stories, but it wasn't necessarily through books. And in fact, my love of comics was more of a way of me doing it myself and engaging in stories that way, because I didn't have that sense of being read to lots and engaging with books. And that's why it's actually not that surprising I didn't have an experience with Roald Dahl, because it just wasn't something that was that happen very much. And one thing I'd love is for my daughter to be a much better reader than me. And I say better reader, like someone who, like kind of what you're talking about, Tim, like you'll pick up a book and then you won't want to put it down. My memory, it was a lot harder for me to kind of keep the attention span to read a book as a child, a whole book. And there's literally only a handful of books I can remember like really sort of engaging with to that level.
I was the exact same. I don't really have. I have memories of these books that come with cassettes, and I'd play them to myself, which sounds really sad, but I don't really remember my parents reading to me as a kid. And that's one thing I try to install as of one of my need to do's really as a parent was to always make sure I got home in time for Katie's bedtime and to read her a book, because working in the city, it's quite easy to miss that.
I was talking about before how I really didn't like reading to our daughter initially. And when that was happening, I was really worried, like, this whole, I wanted her to be a good reader and to kind of love books. But this is just really, I was really not enjoying it. And I was like, is it always going to be this much of a slog reading these nonsensical books that I just didn't get anything from? And because that's what, it's kind of like we talked about before, that's what you do. You're a parent. You have to read this stuff. And that's why it was so great when she finally got that spark of recognition for stories. And then Julia Donaldson was someone I'd never heard of until my daughter was 2. And then suddenly I was so grateful for her because, again, her writing I thought was wonderful. Like, there's a reason why books are popular. It's not just a brand. It's like the writing is really good. Like the rhyming is spot on, but there's a real rhythm. And I think she trained as a lyricist, or she was a lyricist before. And it really comes through that there's a real musicality to it almost. The way she uses language. It's so simple and just brilliant.
It's funny for older children as well. David Walliams' books now seem to be having that very similar effect for older kids.
Right.
And Katie it's one of the books she keeps going back to even at senior school now. Is some of the David Walliams books, which shocks me when you actually see him on TV that he writes these brilliant children's books.
Isaac, over the last year or so, has really fallen in love with the David Walliams books, and actually, I've been really surprised listening to him reading them or reading them with him that actually he's a really good writer of character, which is what I think kids at that kind of age, sort of 8-9 years old, really start to buy into. It's not just the words and the functionality of the mechanics of reading. They really start to associate with big characters and some of the almost the kind of like the slapstick humour that you get with it.
He's very similar in the character building. It goes about it in the same, very similar way to Roald Dahl did, I think.
And for me, reading was a big part of my life growing up. And, in many ways, I doubt I'd have become a blogger without reading, because it was such a big part of my life. It fueled my vocabulary, my imagination, and my ability to, construct an argument or a narrative in writing. And then maybe that's something to do with kind of my nature, because I'm I'm a very strongly introverted person. So, that kind of ability almost to lose myself in a book, that's something that comes very naturally to someone who is a strong introvert. But, with you guys, it's great to hear your stories as well, because without necessarily having had a childhood full of books and reading and bedtime stories, you've still managed to draw your own kids into that world as well. And it's really gratifying, I think, to have a child who does have a genuine love of reading.
She certainly loves it. I mean, before she could even read anything, she would, at bedtime, she'd want to just stay up an extra 10 minutes on her own, reading a book. I say reading in inverted commas. She'd just be going through and making up stories. And I love listening to her stories. Like, we just read her a story and then she'll just go through and for 10 minutes deliver her riff on the story. We saw when we saw the BFG film, was it last summer it came out? She was very taken. I think we'd read it before as well. She was very taken with the image of Sophie, I think it is, reading with a torchlight under the covers. That she loved reading so much that she was willing to get into trouble. But she loved she loved this idea of Sophie was just loving reading so much that it washed away all other concerns. I can just see it. She's a reader. She's just there. We just need to encourage it as much as we can. But basically, she's there wanting to kind of engage in stories. And we keep talking to her about how empowering it is, without using the word empowering, but how great it is. Just imagine, like, instead of asking us to read you a story, you can just walk up to a shelf and pick up a book and read it yourself. And then, and you can engage in it that way. Just that's the thing to keep in mind as you're learning to read and how difficult it is. But it's ultimately giving her power to explore things, which is, I think that's why I'm really sort of keen for her to do it, to be able to do this, is because it just gives them, you must see this, Tim, and well, both of you, John, as well, just like the ability for them to kind of bypass you and go and find their own knowledge is priceless.
Absolutely, and I think that's what books give us, isn't it? It's not just the ability to read, but it's that curiosity and that thirst for knowledge. And going back to what you were saying just then, Simon, it's actually just the art of telling your own stories, which is a really valuable skill in any walk of life. To kind of sum up this discussion, we live now in an era of Twitter sound bites and fake news and anti-intellectualism, and it really does worry me a bit that we're starting to lose sight of the value of both long form reading and writing, and that there is a danger of everything being reduced to 140 character debates and arguments being won by he who shouts loudest and most controversially, rather than he who is right. You only need to look at the high profile and headline grabbing pronouncements enjoyed by the likes of Piers Morgan and Katie Hopkins and that bloke who's the president of the United States now. There's not a whole lot that we as individuals can do about that, but what we can control is our ability to influence and educate our children in the value of books and knowledge and storytelling, and hope that we won't lose sight of the fact that the pen should always be mightier than the tweet. But that's it for another episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the three of us online. John?
It's at DadUGeek on Twitter and dadugeek.co.uk for the blog.
And Simon?
I'm Man vs Pink, Man vs Pink on Twitter and .com and Instagram and Facebook and other places I've forgotten.
And I'm at Thatcham Dad, and you can find me at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com. So you can download this podcast on iTunes and on Android devices from our website at meettheparentspodcast.com and via a variety of podcasting apps. Do please give us a follow on Twitter at Parents Podcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. And if you're an iTunes user, do please visit the Meet the Parents podcast page and leave a star rating and a review. Anyway, thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.